And hello everyone, welcome to your very first official Flask tutorial. So, in this tutorial we'll be covering the very bare basics of Flask and just set up an app. We're not going to learn too much, just setting it up. Now first we want to actually create a project folder or whatnot. I'm going to open up my file manager, I'm going to go to documents. I have a special trash folder for these occasions. I'm going to create a new folder, just call it Flask. You can make this folder anywhere you want, you can call it anything you want, it doesn't matter on the end of the day. Then I want to open up VS Code in here. I don't know how to do that from my file manager, so I'll just do it from my terminal. But you can just usually right click and open up whichever code editor you prefer. It doesn't have to be VS Code, it can be PyCharm, Notepad++, Notepad, Sublime Text, whatever text editor or IDE you prefer, you can use. I prefer VS Code, so that's what I'll use. So mine's in documents, trash, Flask, and I'll open up VS Code here. Cool. Now I can close that and I can close this. I'll actually open up that later as well. Now I want to create a new file and we can call it either app.py like that, or you can call it wsgi.py. And these two, I'll actually show you an example of both of them, will work if you just say Flask run, but we'll get to that. I'm going to call this main.py, but you can call this app or wasagi or whatever you want. Now let's just resize this a bit so everyone can see. Cool. I'm going to go to terminal and say new terminal. And that will open up a terminal for me. This is what we're going to use to install Flask. So we can just say pip install Flask. You might have to say pip free install Flask or python free-mpip install or just python-mpip install. However you should install it, you can try any of these methods, but for me, pip install Flask works. If you get an error, you might have to do something different. Remember, you do need Python and pip both installed. If you're on Windows, then pip comes with Python. Cool. I already have Flask installed, so it's just going to tell me everything's already satisfied. But you will probably have a bunch of downloading stuff happening here. Cool. Then from in here, we can run everything. Now let's first create our first app before we try to run anything. So from Flask, import Flask. And this will allow us to actually use Flask. Then we can say app is equal to Flask and then underscore underscore name underscore underscore. Now for those of you who don't know, this just basically gives the module name. We can actually print name here. And now if we were to go python main.py, and it's just to run it. Some of you might have a play button to run it, like here. I just never use that. I prefer doing it here. And as you can see, it says main, because this is the main file being run. But you just have to say that, and that will basically tell Flask what file or what process is trying to start it up. Now here, we can add a route. Now a route is where you can go to get some information. In this case, we can say app.route. And we can just put a / here. We'll get back to this later, but just put a / there. Not a backward slash, but a /. Then create a function, and this can be anything. I'm just going to say hello world. And in here, I'm just going to return hello world. Cool, and we have created a very basic Flask app. Now the challenge is to run this app. I'm going to show you a couple of ways you can run this app because there are multiple ways. First of all, we need to set what environment we want to run it at. In this case, export Flask env is equal to development because we're going to do development. However, if you're on Windows, export may not work. You might have to say set and not export. I don't know how you actually set environment variables on Windows, but I'm pretty sure Google knows how. So if you're on Windows, you should just Google how to set environment variables. Then whenever you open up this terminal, you have to just export or set this to tell Flask you're doing development and you're not on production. Okay, now we have set it to development. Now, if you called your app Wasagi or app, whichever one, then you can just say Flask run. And this will start up the server. And that's just if you called it app. You can also go Python -m Flask run. If Flask run fails, then you can use this to run it through Python. And that will work as well. If you didn't name it app or Wasagi, then let's say main for example, then you need to export another variable. So export Flask app and then the name of the file. In this case, we can just say main. If you called yours something different, because it's just without the .py. So if you called your file cool.py, then it will be cool. Mine is main.py, so I'll go main. And if you're on Windows, you'll have to change out how you do this. It's not export on Windows, it is set. However, I do think if you use PowerShell, export might work. But I am not sure. I don't use Windows. Okay, and now if you say Flask run or Python-m Flask run, then you'll get this. Now you want to open up your browser right here. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to copy this, or as it says, I can just Alt and then click on it and it will open it up in the browser. And here we get Hello World right here. Let's actually zoom in a bit. So Hello World, and then here we have our Hello World we used. Now, this whatever you put in here will basically be what's being displayed here. So if we put some HTML in here, for example h1, then if we were to refresh, then it will now say Hello World. This here will automatically update this code here. So if you save here, then this will refresh for you and you can just refresh the browser. And there we go, we get Hello World. So whatever we return here will basically pop up here. We can even add a few exclamation marks. We can change the name here to I am cool. And still, all of this will work perfectly fine. And that's the basics of setting up a Flask app. Now let's go from the top just so we make sure we know what's going on. First we import Flask. Then we're creating an app by setting app equal to Flask name underscore underscore name underscore underscore. This is basically just monkey see, monkey do. You just copy paste this. It doesn't really matter too much for us because we're never going to focus too much on that. Then here you're setting the route. The next tutorial will be on route, so I'm not going to go too deep into what this does right now. And then you create a function. And then that function, whatever it returns, will be displayed here. So here we can say x is equal to 10, and then y is equal to x times 5. And then if you go here and make that an if string, we can say y is, and then y. Now if we save it, we refresh, y is 50. So whatever is returned here will be displayed here. Cool. And that's it. Also, in future tutorials, I won't be using this inbuilt terminal here. I will be using my own terminal that looks like this. And I'm going to go to Documents, Trash, Flask. I'll be using this one here. So just for future reference, I won't be using the inbuilt one in VS Code. And yeah, that's that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next Flask tutorial.